Hello, welcome to Poetry Changes Lives. Poetry meets history every day of the year, including leap year. On this book, here's the paperback version. There's a hardcover version as well. If you go to the website, poetrychangeslives.com, you can read all about it, all about various kinds of poetry, and you can buy the book there if you have a mind to, or you can get it direct from Amazon. I've been giving it to friends and colleagues of mine, and I get a lot of messages back from people saying it's a very nice book to have, and they enjoy dipping into it every day of the year. And that's very nice to know, because when I started writing the book, I realized that there weren't actually in existence that many books that offer people a sort of daily little dose of information about history, which increases our general knowledge, and a poem for the day, which is a very nice thing to have. I find that, I've been sitting in this garden reading a poem a day, every day of the year, for a couple of years now, and I enjoy it because I find reading a bit of poetry every day does me so much good. It settles me for the day. It fills my mind with one or two ideas and a bit of beauty as well, I have to say. And that's all very, very good for me, I find. And I think it could be the same for you too, if you give it a try. It's a kind of therapy, self-administered therapy, that people have been giving themselves for a long time. A response to emotional upheaval. Read a poem, or even try writing a poem, can very much help. It is a form of self-therapy. Let me demonstrate. Today, I'm going to talk about Zelda Fitzgerald and her husband, Scott Fitzgerald, a famous American writer of the 1920s and 30s. They were, at first, a kind of a golden couple, but their marriage, like so many others before and after them, went off the rails, largely because they both were very fond of the bottle of alcohol, and Zelda Fitzgerald, Scott's wife, was mentally unstable as well. She had fits of depression. I'm not sure quite what her diagnosis was, but sadly she died in a fire at a mental hospital in the United States on this day in 1948. A sad end, a really sad end. She is often seen as a mere sidekick to her talented husband, Scott Fitzgerald, but that's a bit unfair, because she did write one novel that, by some accounts, was quite good, and indeed it is said that Scott, her husband, very unkindly plagiarized parts of it. He stole parts of it to use in his own work, which is a pretty rotten thing to do, but by then their marriage had got pretty rotten altogether, unfortunately. At first, they'd been fated as, a kind of really special couple. Then people started to gossip about their behavior, particularly the drinking. And eventually, they were seen by smart society as a real embarrassment. And other people like Ernest Hemingway, speaks about them, writes about them in their memoirs as a really sort of sad, desperate couple. Of course, Ernest Hemingway, he could hardly talk. His behaviour was pretty rotten as well to his various wives. Well, Scott and Zelda's stormy relationship, alcoholism and mental instability at the core of it, really took off, and eventually they separated. Scott died in 1940, aged only 44, in Hollywood, and at the time of his death he hadn't seen his wife for well over a year, which is such a sad end to what had been such a great starting point. You know, she had been brought up in the deep South and had had a very privileged childhood, really, and he came from a good family as well. It's so awful how addiction can ruin relationships, as it does to so many people today. It's getting worse, if anything. We really need to do something about addiction in the world. Well, Scott was a poet as well as a writer of great novels. When Zelda died after that terrible fire, she was buried next to Scott. On the headstone are the ending lines from Scott Fitzgerald's great, some say his greatest of all books, The Great Gatsby. The final lines of that are famous. There they are. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. Such a sad but very true statement. Scott, though his life was so troubled, he wrote a lot of truths in his book about human behaviour. He was very aware of what was happening in his life, I think, sadly. I'm going to read his poem, A Play Twice Seen, which the more I read, the more sad and thoughtful sort of regret it contains. See what you think of this. A Play Twice Seen. Here in the figured dark I watch once more. There, with the curtain rolls a year away, a year of years. There was an idle day of ours when happy endings didn't bore our unfermented souls, and rocks held awe. Your little face beside me, wide-eyed, gay, smiled its own repertoire, while the poor play reached me as a faint ripple reaches shore. Yawning and wondering, an evening through I watch alone, and chatterings, of course, spoil the one scene which somehow did have charm. You wept a bit, and I grew sad for you, right there, where Mr. X defends divorce, and what's-her-name falls fainting in his arms. He's obviously being drawn back to personal experience and feeling really sad and regretful about it all. But, you know, life happens like that so much. And what can we do about it? Here we are, two boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. That's what Scott seems to be saying again in his poem. Very sad, but life has to go on, doesn't it? Today, I will try to set realistic goals for myself, and I will remember that perfectionism can be an excuse for doing nothing. Thanks for listening. Have a good day.